What's up, guys? I'm SaltEMike, and this is your weekend review for November 2nd, 2020. If this is your first weekend review, basically what this video is a weekly video that comes out on Monday where we compile all of the previous week's official Star Citizen news, pile them into one video, and I insert my opinions in there as well. So if you guys do enjoy these videos, make sure you hit the like button. That really helps out with the YouTube algorithm so we can get to more people and the channel can grow. A lot of people make comments, I don't know why your YouTube channel is so small. Well, we just started, so we kind of need your help, and yeah, likes really help that. Also, there's a lot of people who comment below, and I appreciate that very much, but a lot of you guys aren't subscribed, so make sure you guys hit the subscribe button as well if you guys are enjoying the videos. And lastly, I do live stream on Twitch, so every day but Monday, so I can get this video out to you, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern time, I am on twitch.tv/SaltEMike. So if you want to stop by, hang out, share your thoughts about anything we discussed on these videos, or show some support, that is the place to do it. I don't really have any monetization models here on YouTube other than the obvious ads that they provide. All right, let's get into that video, starting out with Roadmap Roundup, because we don't have any patches this week. There's nothing really to discuss there. So Roadmap Roundup started out with something really wild. The Ageis is going to be in the final wave of security protection at rest stops. So we know they dropped the Armistice zones recently, and well, in 3.11 in the patch that we're in now. And now if you fire in them and take down a few security waves, eventually the Ageis is going to show up to take you out. This gives us Invictus vibes from, you know, Captain Burks and Detox, who obviously took down these huge ships on live stream for everybody to see. It was incredible. Now, hopefully mining ships aren't the key to this, and we'll have, right? Like, there was a lot of like weird glitches and bugs related to this. So now hopefully the Ageis can be properly taken down in a more militaristic way. So we'll have to see, instead of mining the ship down. They also started out with adding some things to 3.12. So we talked about this last week. I kind of called this last week, where they usually gut the roadmap of a few things, and then the following week they decide what they're going to add to it, right? Everything is, at this stage, is basically coming down to its go or no-go situation. Some things don't make it in, other things do. So here are the things that are being added. A lot of AI updates. So the first one basically gives the ability for the AI to use different fire modes that we now have with turrets. It also gives turrets priority targeting. So basically, the pilot of a ship can be aiming perfectly at a ship in front of it, but the turret might have a better opportunity to take out somebody behind it. So it's basically giving the AI the understanding of how to prioritize targets. They also enabled AI to intercept and shoot down torpedoes. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, because there's also some torpedo changes that came in. Capital ship updates. Obviously, the Ageis is coming in, so now when gunships were added to the game, this is a similar situation where ships like the Constellation fly a certain way because it's considered a gunship. Well, capital ships are going to have certain ways of flying and enacting in combat. So that's basically what's happening here. Next is countermeasures version 1.1. So the more you fire your flare and chaff, the more effective it will be. Also, different missiles are going to have different resilience levels to certain countermeasures. So you need to choose, again, sort of which ones to use instead of just wildly firing both. And yeah, you have a limited amount of these things. There's also a limited amount of missiles, but if chaff is the most effective, we don't have a lot of that. So this kind of allows for players' game knowledge to become a skill. So firing certain missiles to waste someone's chaff to then fire that final blow where they don't have a countermeasure to take it out is something that is really now possible, it seems like. And that torpedo rework that we talked about. They are going to be able to hit way harder than they already do because they need to be able to take out capital-sized ships. They are also way slower. So this allows turrets to take them out, AI, and hopefully players as well. I just have my concerns right now with how broken the game is. Obviously, our client frame rate is incredibly slow. The server frame rate is incredibly slow. I feel like we're going to have a hard time taking these missiles out, but we'll have to see. I'm also wondering how countermeasures play in with torpedoes, so we'll have to see what happens with all that, but I like the ideas here. Torpedoes should be slow, easily evaded by smaller ships, but also able to be taken out by larger ships. Then lastly, the mining UI. We don't have to go into this much. It was essentially just added to the roadmap of what we saw in last week's ISC, but the big thing here is that it showed the UI on the mole. In the video, we only saw it on the prospector, so it seemed like maybe this won't make it to other mining ships like the mole or the ROC. Looks like it's going to, so that's pretty exciting. They also teased the scanning mode of it, which is when you first look at a rock when in mining mode, it scans it for what materials are in there, and it hints at some level of a scanning rework with this noise meter in the top left. So we'll have to see how all that plays out in the future whenever a new scanning version comes in, but that does tease at some changes that are on the way. Other notable changes here are the A03 is Gemini, the sniper rifle, not bearing. I fell for that one last week. Surrender is off the roadmap completely for right now. They moved the tractor beam attachment for the multi-tool into the gameplay section because all of the tasks are about the action of using it and not building out the attachment. And then the Mercury Star Runner is now in polishing. So my expectation is that you'll see this on Twitch live streams with the community team showing it off to live streamers and sequentially, like those videos popping up on YouTube as well pretty soon. Next, we have some video updates. These were pretty beefy again this week. 2 weeks in a row with some pretty beefy updates from Jared, starting out with Inside Star Citizen. Jared's doing his Halloween thing that he does every year. Obviously, this is not a discussion topic, but it was funny. Hopefully, you guys enjoy that. Again, link in the description so you can watch it for yourself. As far as like the meaty informational stuff, we had a manufacturer UI update. And the show starts out with giving us our first look at manufacturer UIs and ships. John Carew basically explains the main problem that needs to be solved here in this update.
We have a fairly comprehensive list of what we needed to be displayed on the HUD. What's there in game at the moment doesn't cover all of that.
Essentially, they have way too much information that needs to be shared for a player and not a lot of real estate to work with it. So the UI director goes into their initial process a little bit here with some of the initial designs shown as well.
There were two major pushes towards getting the Aegis style right. The first of those, we kind of focused on the look mainly. There's a lot of design considerations. For example, we want to make sure that everything's got a decent amount of space. Legibility is a big thing. If you've got text in there, it needs to be big enough to see. We also try and make similar things look similar, so if you have a button, it needs to look like a button. Also, we want to avoid things like overlaps. You don't want things to be on top of each other. And in general, with the new HUD as well, what we're trying to do is keep the flight information on the left and save the right-hand side for kind of mode-specific stuff.
The process seems pretty cool. Seems fine to me. Obviously, the initial design is really minimalist and doesn't really solve the problem of all of that information that needs to be shared, right? So we'll see it iterate throughout the video here today, but yeah, I mean, the process seems pretty standard and pretty cool. Next is probably two of the most useful things that ever needed to be added to the HUD are being added to the HUD. So enjoy.
So during the design process for this phase, we took the opportunity to add in some much requested fan favourite features, such as having a compass, which will aid in navigation both in atmosphere and space, and between those two modes it's either relative to the planet or relative to the galactic plane, and a radar altimeter. So in game at the moment you do sort of have an altimeter, but it's only relative to the perfect Z0 height of the planet, so mountains aren't accounted for, whereas this will account for that.
A compass has so many important uses for multi-crew combat and gameplay, all the way to mining, to make sure you're not flying around in circles and scanning the same rocks and minerals, right? The radar altimeter will help as well because, you know, you think you're flying at a comfortable altitude sometimes and then you smash into a mountain on Microtech. It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you too. So yeah, I mean, that'll be really helpful. This next part is a bit long, but I think it's by far the most important. It just basically shares the breakdown of what the final HUD and like the placement of all of the elements and what they all mean for you. So yeah, if you have an Aegis ship, this is how it's going to work.
So if we look at the final concept, we'll go over some of the features that are there now. If we start at the top, this is where all your warning messages are primarily, so these will cascade in, and much like the current version, they will be coloured to indicate severity. Directly underneath that is a new element dealing with your emissions or signatures and sort of infrared cross-section and EM signature relative to the background, which is going to be very cool for stealth gameplay. And then we have sort of the main piece of the HUD, which is much wider than we currently have, and that has everything to do with your velocity, thrust capacity, your thrust amount, your fuel amount, your vertical bearings, and then your altitude above the ground. Underneath there we have two little spherical widgets, which is sort of your 3D velocity indicator, because quite often in space where you're pointing is not where you are actually heading, so these will give you some visual indication of that in 3D. And then right at the very bottom we have your sort of status warning, so whether you're in coupled or decoupled, whether ESP is on, whether you're in VTOL mode, your landing gear, your countermeasure status, and then finally bottom right is what sort of weapon firing mode you're in, whether it's auto gimbals here, manual gimbals, or fixed.
Okay, I feel like I'm going to be speculating a lot here, but there is a lot of stuff on the screen, and they don't show what it looks like in a fight, and I have a concern that it might be a little bit distracting. Now, they hinted at modes in one of the clips, so maybe we'll have a combat mode that's a little bit less crazy. Like, do we need an altimeter in space, right? Probably not. So my assumption is in certain scenarios, some of these things will not be there, and you'll have a little bit more screen real estate to see what's going on around you, but we'll have to see as these things enter into the game. There's also some speculation that, with using the Gladius, there's some buttons that you can turn on and off some of these elements. But again, we'll have to see. What are your thoughts about this initially? We did talk a little bit about it in Week in Review, in Answer the Call this week. So if you guys want to check that video out, you can as well. Next, we went into power management and how this is going to work in Star Citizen. And we start out with Dan Truffin, who's, in my opinion, the gameplay loop god in Star Citizen, since his team is the only one that's really made a working loop so far with mining gameplay. And he gives us a general idea of how the components, and more specifically, how powering them will work in Star Citizen.
So with the resource management, we have this idea that there is one way the resources are managed throughout the entire game. There's one way to consume them, one way to produce them, and all the items everywhere, they use the same system. So we started by creating this small example of a ship where we have a power plant, we have a fuel tank, a battery, we have lights inside the ship, we have turrets, we have weapons. We try to build a priority system, so you never want your lights to have the same priority as, for example, your power plant or your weapons. Basically, as soon as we start the simulation, the power plant goes, I'm online now, but I have no fuel. So all of this energy right now, the lights start draining the battery. If we put some fuel in the fuel tank, as soon as we put it in, the power plant starts going online, the battery starts replenishing because there's not that many consumers online. If I go, okay, let's say I set my weapons, my laser weapons to fire, as soon as I do that, there will be more drain on the energy. We can actually see we have a simulation of resources. We know we're producing this much power and we're requesting this much. We're running everything through exactly the same system.
So this is really simple. It's easy to understand, and clearly it's just an example. So I doubt we will drain things that quickly, but it allows me to understand exactly how it will work. Next, to give a more real-world example of how a larger ship will work, and they used basically a hammerhead design, a rough one.
We built this tool in a way that allows us to build different ship configurations. So as you can see, you can kind of understand the the basic shape of a hammerhead. As soon as I turn on the simulation, we can see we have both power plants are starting to produce power. The fuel tank starts to get drained. The battery is on full capacity. We have these relays. Relays are a new concept that we're introducing in the ship. In order for all those resources to travel from the fuel tank to the power plant, from the power plant to the battery, from the battery to the lights, everything travels through these relays. Now, each relay you have on your ship is going to consume power. So the less you have, the more efficient you're going to be. The more you have you're going to be more redundant. For example, in this case, let's say someone sabotages this and they destroy this part. You can see already this part of the ship lost resources. If we lose this one, this power plant is off. Let's say now I need to start shooting. So I'm manning my turrets and they're shooting. You will start notice my lights started going off because in the priority, my lights are very low priority. If you look at the battery is starting to drain. Let's say at this point it reaches 0. It ran out. Now this turret is off. It doesn't have power. This one is not running at what we requested because there's only one power plant running.
This is cool. I can see myself running all over the ship, trying, during a fight or post-fight to try to repair everything, get it back to normal. I mean, obviously we saw fire propagation as well and how that could possibly play into this in previous ISCs. On the reverse side, knowing the layout of the ship can allow you to know its weaknesses. Where to attack first, how to disable a hammerhead, right? Those kind of things. Aiming for a power plant or aiming for a battery instead of a power plant, or a certain area of these relays might be pretty neat. And the last part is obviously a min-maxer's dream.
So let's say now I'm transporting goods. I'm just moving from A to B. It's a pleasure cruise, no problem. I never want to travel like this. Each of these relays is going to be a drain on resources. So I'm going to turn this one off because I can turn this one off and I can turn this one off. And power and resources still have a route to travel. And I'm still keeping everything online. I'm trying to minimize the number of things that I'm powering on the ship. So this would be a viable configuration in which I'm still keeping everything on the ship fully functional. But let's say I go into battle. With this configuration into battle, if I take a hit here and this gets shot or gets sabotaged, I instantly lost half of my firepower.
Pretty cool, right? I mean, I could see myself taking part in this gameplay as well while cargo hauling, but I do hope that, and I'm sure there will be since this is such an early prototype, that there's going to be some presets, right? That hopefully we have to create ourselves, so you have to think and use your brain and play with this UI, but in general, once you've figured out something that works for you, I hope we can have some presets where you just hit a button and it, powers down certain relays or power plants or whatever that you may not need while just casually flying, and then quickly power them on when you're getting attacked. It'd be kind of a pain to have to, run around the ship or click a bunch of buttons in the middle of a fight where you're super vulnerable. So, yes. And then we also had a Calling All Devs this week, and Calling All Devs was a long one. It was about 30 minutes, and I'll do my best to break it down because we have two of the most talkative guys in Star Citizen. And while this is great, again, link is in the description. I highly recommend you take half an hour out of your life, like you are watching this video, and watching this video in its entirety. They start out, I think it wouldn't be healthy to not start out with what Death of a Spaceman means in Star Citizen, because some of you may be fairly new to the game and didn't back in 2013 when this was a widely available information.
So kind of the idea was like, what kind of consequence can we have in our persistent universe in terms of, how do we encourage the players to stay alive? How do we encourage the players to keep their ship or repair their ship intact? We don't want people to just go, oh, I got a scratch, I'm just going to respawn in a perfectly pristine state for the character or the ship. And so Death of the Spaceman was sort of an idea to give an association with your player character in the game, in terms of this is who you are, and you want to keep yourself alive as possible, as much as possible, and identify with your avatar as an actual real person and character, and you care about and you want to keep alive. And then finally, when you've had one too many close calls or lost one too many battles, you no longer can be resuscitated, and you have to pass on essentially to your next of kin, which will have you call out basically who your next of kin is when you're sort of doing your character creation.
Okay, so that was the gist of it. It was in a post in 2013, and the idea of how they want to create a sense of loss is for each death, and the eventual idea of the death of your characters, how they want to go about it. I like that. I think it's one of the things that sold me on Star Citizen. But, obviously that does create a lot of questions, and is it even implemented anymore? So the idea of this show this time was to kind of imply and share that, yeah, this is the way we're going. So what's even better is that it's actively in development now. So let's hear now from Rich Tyrer about what they're working on. And yes, I did my best to edit this down into a nice condensed version.
So, well, we've already kind of started. So body dragging was the first feature that we released that kind of gave you the premise to be able to manipulate, dead bodies. But as Chris calls out, death is going to be a really important factor in Star Citizen. Now, death, there's kind of 3 deaths along the spectrum. There's kind of what we're calling like the down state. So that's kind of like when you've, your health has gone to 0 and you're there. And when you're in that scenario, you'll be able to kind of choose to kind of stay there and be like, okay, I need my buddies to come and rescue me. Then there is the kind of like you've died in terms of you've given up the ghost, nobody's coming. You're like, okay, that's it. I'm leaving that body there, and I'm going to go back to a hospital and be revived. But that's kind of part of your DNA. That DNA is kind of going to be reimpregnated into essentially a clone of you. And then you'll be able to then go back to your location, and you'll be able to see, your dead body there. And as long as nobody's been there, you'll be able to retrieve your gear and so on and so forth. And then there's the third aspect in terms of like you passing on to your next of kin and that kind of thing. So what we're actually evaluating now is kind of how it's integrated into kind of like the core healing gameplay and the actor status. So, and what that will do is introduce drugs. So you'll have a blood drug level and you'll be able to manipulate things, but it will also introduce all the different statuses that are surrounding you as a character. So for example, when you're in battle and you take a really bad wound to the arm, you might say, okay, I've got a fracture, so my arm, I've got a permanent fracture. I'd have to go back to the hospital to get that repaired.
All right, the down state was the important thing to point out here. I think it was obviously going to be a thing, but it was nice to point out. And the choices you have to make are to either take that true death and respawn, or, ask for your friends to come help you. What they're evaluating now is also key. It's the down states, the healing, different types of wounds. It went on for 5 minutes, and it was this clip was incredibly difficult to tell what is expected in the next few releases. So the next part really does kind of clear that up a lot more.
So what we're planning on working on in the future, so relatively soon, shall we say, is kind of the hospital groundwork. So the hospitals in the locations, the ability for you to be able to go to those hospitals and kind of download your DNA is kind of like your save point, or kind of like the area where you would be respawned. We already obviously have body dragging in and some of the medical bays in there, but what we'll be introducing is active status T1. So that will be drugs. So for example, we'll be introducing some drugs as part of that. So like adrenaline. I think we've already got some black market drugs in there that will tie into this, but also like alcohol. So if you go to the bartender, you'll be able to get drunk, and we'll have, the relevant animations and locomotion sets that tie into that. Because obviously then there'll be a risk reward that you can't just keep medipenning like you can't in real life. You can't just keep popping paracetamol, all of that kind of thing will kind of tie into it in terms of that blood drug level. And that will, if you keep taking drugs, you will eventually, overdose and you'll need to be revived. So you'll have to manage that on that actor status side of things. And we'll also be introducing the healing loop in terms of those being able to revive you from a down state. And obviously that in the DNA integrity side of things. So as you basically die, you'll be able to have battle through revive, so we can bring you back in the same body, and that is obviously you'll be there, but you may come back with, you may have a permanent visuals, but that won't be part of T0, the visuals, just to be clear. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're working on, that core gameplay loop, actor status T1, and hospital locations. Those are the 3 main big kind of like areas that we're trying to push forward on.
So it's clearly downstates, drugs, and how they act differently to stabilize yourself. And what this really means is it's the end of the magical med pen. med pens and other tools are going to have different uses and different qualities that do different things. They mentioned blood clotting and stabilization maybe is the thing for your med pen, and that makes medical ships and the like more important to deal with more severe injuries, right? All right, that is it for video updates. Let's move on to other updates where we're pretty beefy here as well. We had the Day of the Vara contest winners. Links will be in the description for that. Pumpkin carving contest winners as well. Some of these were absolutely incredible. We also had a Refinery sneak peek. This is looking pretty good. I just hope the gameplay of refining does make it into the patch. Last week's ISC implied that the UI will make it towards the end of the 3.11 cycle, so we don't know if it's going to make it in just yet. The Intergalactic Aerospace Expo. So this is the event which is going to be from November 20th to December 2nd. It's quite a long time. This is their funding drive every year. I'm not expecting anything too crazy, just, you know, some ships. They had a sneak peek of clearly some ships that are probably going to be going on for sale. What do you think they are? For me, the left kind of looks like a Star Runner. Middle looks pretty Drake. And the right, I have no idea. So yeah, leave some comments in below what you think it is. Also, there was a bug in Arena Commander where if you purchased the ship for real money, or maybe even in-game credits, you could not customize it. That will be fixed in the next patch. I'm not sure if that means like the patch that comes with the Star Runner or 3.12, but they're aware of it. It will eventually be fixed. There was also a lore post on Talon. This is not the Asperia Talon. This is the explosives company Talon that makes missiles. I like this kind of lore personally. You know, it's the companies that really tell the story of the game right now. So hearing their stories is pretty cool. Jump Point for October is out. Law System interview with, you know, guys like Luke Presley and Elliot, people who worked on the game, the actual Law System gameplay, and then how the 100i was implemented as well. And then Imperator election results. Addison won. That's the AI lady. So what's gonna happen? It seemed like the writing team specifically did not want us to have her. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But again, that's gonna be it for this week, guys. I really do appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much. Leave a comment below, likes, subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video. If not, leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts too. I don't mind. I can take it now. I'm getting used to YouTube comments. But also, feel free to stop by my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/SaltEMike. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching, guys.